A little background on me. I've been with Proximity for about 4 years. Started my career a long time ago in the barley breeding program of Anheuser-Busch. So that was kind of my first job, kind of cut my teeth in our industry on barley. Spent a little time in soil through the roots in the form of root exudates. And that carbon, that liquefied carbon, feeds all these little things in there. And in turn, they create that's naturally occurring compost in soil because the soil is actively contributing to crop growth.
Are the farmers out there, are they focusing on mycorrhizal relationships at all? Do you know anything?
Some of them do.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious, because if they're going down that route, I know it can boost their production 100% and stuff.
And I would say everywhere farms look at mycorrhizal, because that's like, you're exactly right. You're introducing a beneficial organism to promote something, right?
Right.
So I wanted to show you this because this is both the goal and the proof of concept that regenerative ag is real. And if you're going from hardcore corporate farming, you are not going to see this in 2 or 3 years. You could see this in 10 years, depending on where you're at. But this is not like soil is literally has to be weaned off of chemicals and heavy tillage over time. And then you can run a regenerative farm. So I want to talk a little bit more about regenerative ag, and I want to be very clear. This is Proximity Malt's definition. It's not the definition because there is organic agriculture, which is all about what's going on top of the soil or not being sprayed on top of the soil. And there are strict rules. Everybody follows them in the U.S. Same rules. Doesn't matter your farm. These are the rules for organic. With regenerative, it's a one-on-one relationship with farms because they all farm different. They have different rotations. They have different soil types. They have different climatic conditions. So you can't just be like, hey, these 5 things or you're out, or you won't have any farmers join. But we start with tillage. So no-till farming. Again, there's amazing things happening in the soil. We want to let them happen. If you take a moldboard plow, turn over the top 18 inches of topsoil a couple times a year, you're going to destroy it. Mother Nature intended soil to be left alone with a lot of different things growing in it all the time. So that's where we start our conversation with our farms. Hey, would you consider no-till? If not, would you consider minimum till? Maybe residue type tillage, where you're just talking about the top inch of topsoil, just getting rid of a few things, but we don't want you digging in deep and ruining what's happening in there. And we talk about cover crops, which is essentially keeping roots in the soil. Between your cash crops, don't just leave your dirt there to blow away. Put something in there. Keep something living in there. So carbon is pulled out of the atmosphere, which feeds the plants. Plants push it into the soil or they sequester it. They feed the microorganisms, and we want to diversify the rotation. So we want people to grow malt barley.
What would be an example of a cover crop?
Yeah, so there's a lot of them. Most of them are blends. So, radishes are usually a component. Rye can be, but there's normally 2 or 3 different species because every type of plant puts its own unique root exudate into the soil. So if you can have 3 different plants depositing different types of food for the microbiome, that's better than just one. We have producers, some of them use as many as 12. And it's freaking awesome. Yeah.
So would they rotate? So when I learned about this back in school, when we called it no-till, regenerative is obviously a newer, 15 years newer.
Yeah.
When we were talking cover crops, what we would do is rotate cover crops through the fields. So now you're saying we would mix the cover crops within the fields at the same time, not just regenerative, like having every year swapping whatever crop would be there. So that's a newer concept. That's what I understand.
And both are okay. So, I think rule number 1, you always want something growing in there.
Okay.
But what, if you have the equipment, some of this is mechanical things you have to do with your planter. Like if you can plant some cover crops and they're only going to be this tall off the ground, and then maybe you go back and you drill your malting barley into that. And so the cover crops are already established. Then the barley comes up through them. You can cut the barley without having to pick up the cover crop. So you can have multiple species growing even during a cash crop.
So that's a little different than when I was,
Yeah.
when I was learning in 2012, it was a different story.
Yeah. And it very much depends on where you are. Our version of Regen Ag here in Colorado is so different than it is in Delaware, Virginia, North
I
Carolina.
learned it in Iowa.
Okay, well, you're in the heart. And you also have very incredible soil.
Yeah.
To start with.
That's what I was going to say. We're
Yeah.
nutrient dense regardless.
Oh my gosh,
Really
yeah.
or not.
Nope, every farmer in Colorado would kill to have Iowa soil.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like a weird thing to bring up, but just because mushrooms would be here, a lot of the tilling I have read is you don't want to till because you have somewhat of mycelium network that is there that is kind of also helping with diversification. Is that something that
What kind of network?
mycelium?
It's a fungal network. I
Yeah.
think grasses technically prefer more bacterially dominated soils.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if that's
And I honestly, I'm not familiar with that, so I would not be able to give you a solid answer.
yeah.
Okay, so then we go on to, again, we want to diversify the rotations. So we do not want farmers growing barley on barley on barley. It's terrible for the soil, their yields will go down, it makes pest pressure go up. And then the last one is if they will graze cattle, that's better. That increases the regenerative value of the soil because cows get a bad rap because of all the flatulence, all the methane release.
Yeah.
However, they also are great manure creators and they walk around in it, so they spread it. And when they graze, if you don't leave them on too long without killing the plants, they put them in this kind of panic, hyper photosynthetic state. They're like, I'm about to die. I'm pulling more carbon out of the atmosphere. And so these are the things we talk about our producers with. And if they're willing to commit to at least one, or they're already doing at least one, they're in our program. One of the things we wanted to do was make this non-exclusionary. We wanted any farm with an interest. We didn't want to be like, oh, you're not good enough, or oh, you were already doing it. It's just, if you're in, if you have a commitment, we're good with it. We will handle the data. And so, after they do these things, we see carbon sequestration. And I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about emissions and carbon just because it's important to understand that even if that's not why you dig this, it's important. Water, obviously, we've talked about that in Colorado. If one of our producers can grow a barley field and only put down 13 inches of water compared to 17, 4 inches of water is an incredible amount of acre feet of water that they'll save, which is a commodity in Colorado. We've talked about, you'll hear me say soil health, soil structure, organic matter content.
Not to take you back a plan, but I remember reading something with a bunch of the tilling, are sequestered words. Tilling it lets it right back up in the atmosphere too. So that's just another example of.
Well, it does. It's kind of like you're filling a balloon, kind of, and then you pop it in. You're like, I did all this good stuff, and then you let it go instead of holding it in there. You're absolutely right. Erosion. Do you know how many, on average in Colorado, how many tons of topsoil do our farmers lose every year? You think? It's one of the highest in the U.S. Any guesses? Yes. Most. 9 tons. So 9 tons of topsoil a year per acre. Has anybody ever been? Per acre. Anybody ever been to the sand dunes? National Park?
Skip blast.
Where do you think that sand came from? That sand used to be topsoil, and it went. And all of a sudden, you have an incredible place to take your family, but it used to be topsoil. And then chemicals. So I want to make sure you understand this. Organic farming is about eliminating chemicals, which is good. Regenerative farming will reduce chemicals. It is, but they're never going to go to zero. It's not the same thing. Now, we have producers who are both organic and regenerative, which is cool. So you can have both. But if anybody ever tells you that regen ag will eliminate chemicals, and that could be crop protection or fertilizers, it's not true.
Isn't there a concern with organic farming of more nitrogen runoff?
It can be, yeah. I mean, and organic farming is, well, there are ways to skirt the rules. I've worked, I'm not, I've seen vegetable production, organic vegetable production in Yuma, Arizona, and there are ways. It's not always organic. I'm not here to be down on
Was the
organic.
question about nitrogen runoff? So when I was at Iowa State, we worked with farmers to put riparian strips in between the farm fields and the waterways to soak up all the nitrogen and phosphorus that was leaching off of those soils into the waterways.
Yeah.
So that those plants would utilize that. There's a multitude of different ways that farms are attacking that issue, but I don't know how far we've gotten. I haven't been in farming in a long time. But that was what we were doing back from like 2012 to like 2015.
Yeah, and it's very true. Like different crops leave different amounts. Some are like really good. Their nitrogen use efficiency is like through the roof. You put it down, they use it. Some of them are just like you're like pouring it on them, and they use like potatoes are terrible. You have to fertilize the shit out of them, and they don't use all of it. So what happens? That sits there, hopefully, or if it doesn't, it leaches into groundwater. So nitrogen use efficiency is big. A lot of that has to do with the crop.
And so is that what you're talking about when you're talking about some of the regenerative farmers who are using chemicals still? Is that fertilizers and pesticides that they're using?
Like out in the Mid-Atlantic, a lot of it's fungicide. So, fungicide, you've got diseases. They're foliar diseases, and so the only way you can really control them in a humid environment like that is by applying fungicide. Sometimes like 3 times a year. Here in Colorado, we're high mountain desert. We have almost no disease pressure, so there's automatically less chemicals used here in Colorado. I would say fertilizer. It does come down over time, I would say, but it varies by farm. But again, it's never going to be, it's not going to be zero. And really, that's not the goal of regen ag. It's just kind of a nice side impact. All right, let's switch over to talking about you all. I want to talk about sustainability. So, when we first launched the project, we did a group. We brought a group in and we asked them some questions because we're trying to figure out how do we brand this? How do we make someone care that we're doing this? And we asked this group, what does sustainability mean to your brewery and to your brand? And this is a word cloud of the answers that we got. And I refer to this as like a community focus. Like, if I were to ask any of you about your breweries, what does sustainability mean to you? Like, do you see anything on here that would resonate with you?
Progressive right now.
Yeah.
Local influence.
Yeah.
Responsibility.
Yes. That's right. Yeah. And I think so. If a brewery, if you are sustainable, I believe that it's likely that you stand for these things. And in your communities, craft brewers, without a doubt, you are forces for good in the places where you live and you work. And so this is a perfect example of what sustainability could or should mean to somebody. Is there a word that you don't see up there that you're surprised about?
Something to do with profit.
You're close. and we're going to talk about
Environment, farmers.
Evolution.
So with respect to regenerative agriculture and sustainability, what we were amazed did not come up in this was the word carbon or emissions. So what that told us was that, look, whatever we do with this project, people have to feel this from it. They have to feel these things in some way. But we have a whole other set of customers who, when we ask them, this is their answer. What does sustainability mean to you, Anheuser-Busch, or large shareholder-driven companies? And they will say emissions. We would like to have a carbon neutral beer or a carbon neutral facility. We want to lower our emissions footprint. And so I'm going to spend quite a bit of time here because I think it's important to understand how, this lens, because whether you care about this or not, this is part of what regen is. And so we're going to talk about emissions. So we've got scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So let's all look at our beers. So this beer has a carbon footprint. This brewery has a carbon footprint. Every one of us, not excluded, we all have carbon footprints. Does anybody take a shower today or drive a car or buy groceries? Emissions, that has an emission cost. That has a CO2 footprint, every activity that you do in a day. So when you're a brewery and you're talking about this, you're like, okay, I'm going to start with my scope 1. So what's inside the walls of this brewery right here. And I want to benchmark it. I want to find out what it is. And that's step 1. And then you can decide what to do from there. If you want to take a little further, you can go to scope 2. And that's all your electricity. So if you're using power or fuel to run anything in that brewery, you're purchasing it from somewhere, and it has an emissions footprint to create that energy or that fuel source. And people who get really into this, they go scope 3. And so you're not just talking about your brewery and your energy. You're talking about if you're buying malt from us, you have to make sure you're taking care of mine too. And if you're buying hops, or if you're buying aluminum or cardboard, you have to make sure, because all of those pieces make up the carbon footprint of a pint of beer. And so, does anyone else feel like that seems like a lot? To take on the responsibility for my entire supply chain, upstream and downstream, but it's something you can do. And so, there's an emissions focus. And I would say, if sustainability means something to you, whether one of those ideologies, whether one means more to you than the other, they're both relevant. They're non-mutually exclusive. So keep that in mind. And let's talk more about emissions. Okay. So this is Elevation Brewery right here. Okay, we'll pick on you guys since we're in your place. So you've got your scope 1, that's your facilities and your vehicles, like we talked about. Scope 2, your energy costs, and then today we're just going to talk about your malt cost in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So we might be part of your scope 3, a malting company. So that is nested. So now we're talking about your malting company. So we have our facilities, our scope 1. Our scope 3 is our barley. So if we look at that, we're nesting that down to the farm level. So we're talking about farmers at this point. And remember, we're still just talking about elevation. And what do farmers put on their crops? We've been talking about it. They put down fertilizer. So if you really want to do a full greenhouse gas inventory of your footprint, you literally have to be worried about the people making fertilizer for the farms that your malting company is contracting barley with. And I'll explain how much. So when we say it's nested, this is, in reality, elevations, scope 3 carbon emissions that you have to be worried about if you really want to create a net zero product. And let's see how much, let's go back to our beer. Okay, so the carbon footprint of a pint of beer, and this is on average, okay? So it's going to vary. 30% of the carbon footprint of this beer is scope 1 emissions. It's inside the walls of Elevation Brewing. Okay? Then add on another 15%, that is the energy cost. The energy cost to run Elevation's brewery. So this is like, does anyone of your beer, even though it's way nested down, is tied up in fertilizer? You know, it's like, I don't even, you're like so far removed from that. I've never met a fertilizer manufacturer, and I contact barley. I can't imagine you all would have any impact.
What about transportation of the
Transportation,
scope 3 goes forever?
like transportation of the fertilizer? Oh, yeah. So that would be, yeah, like if we, yeah, so like that would be what you're talking about is the scope 3 of the raw materials. Like if we took it down a 5th level. So again, 33% of your beer is tied, the carbon footprint of your beer is tied up in fertilizer. Makes you mad. But, like fertilizer, really? It's okay, this is good news. It may not seem like it, but this is good news. Because there are solutions to this, which is we're coming back to the farm. We're coming back to the ways farmers can help us. And there's 2 different strategies for taking that 33% and going and bringing it down to 0. So when we talk about carbon or emissions, there's 2 different strategies to reduce emissions. There's reductions, which we'll talk about first, and then there's removals. And the exciting news is that the American Malt and Barley Association, I don't know if anyone's familiar with them, we're like a year into a project. We've baselined our barley, so we have a starting point. So we're trying to crack the code on this, create a common language we can all share across the industry. They're also looking at nitrogen research. Why would we look at that? 33%. It's like smoking gun. Smoking gun. Let's figure that shit out. And then how do we communicate sustainability, which is kind of what we're talking about today. So let's go back to carbon reductions. So just to show you, we don't have irrigation in Delaware, plenty of rain, and you can see just an idea of what the difference looks like between Colorado and a mid-Atlantic farm in terms of the carbon footprint of barley. But if we want to reduce carbon, not remove it, because when I'm talking about sequestering, pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, sinking it in the soil, that is removing it. What we're talking about now is reducing it. And to reduce it, you first have to know where you're at, which is this is where we're at. I know that. This is our 2024 crop year data, and we need tools to do this. And so there's really 2 different types of interventions, agronomy interventions. So you can put seed treatments on your seeds that help utilize nitrogen more efficiently, so you don't need quite so much. So we're bringing nitrogen down. You can put nitrogen fixing seed treatments. So, and honestly, the biological seed treatments, there you go. Biological seed treatments, nitrogen fixing, so the nitrogen sticks and doesn't get leached out and not used. There are fertilizers that have a smaller carbon footprint. We call them, they're kind of big categories. There's gray fertilizers, which is kind of the normal, and now there's green fertilizers, where the process to actually make them is reduced. So that is the fertilizer producer stepping in and being like, hey, I get, I'm a big portion of it. I'm going to help you out. I'm going to offer you this product. They'll probably make you pay more. But there's green fertilizer products. Urease and nitrogen nitrification inhibitors. So that basically slows the fertilizer down because if you just put raw urea, which is about the most raw source of nitrogen you can find, it's just going to go in there and start fucking going for it. Plant's going to take it up, and this is like, hey, let's meter it out. We're putting this in here, put this other thing in that makes it stick around. Take your time. We don't need so much when you do it this way. And so the plant kind of meters how it's going. Improved genetics. We've already talked about yield. You know, if you want to cut your barley carbon footprint in half immediately, double your yield because it's the same amount of carbon there. Nitrogen use efficiency. There's a lot of genetics work. Again, trying to get plants to do more and not piss away so much nitrogen in the soil. Actually utilize it. And then, of course, water use efficiency. If plants aren't stressed, they're in a happy place, if they can handle a little drought, they'll yield more, and you won't have to rely so much on chemical solutions. All right, so that was reductions. Removals is super complex, so I'm going to go through this kind of quick, but this is different. This is proximity malt is going to intervene on a farm. So this is soil organic carbon. This black line. Back pre-industrial ag, before anybody tilled their soil or before nitrogen was put down, there was like a maximum level. Like soil, this was Mother Nature's soil. And over the last century, this is what we've done with industrial farming. Just if you look back, there's different USDA spin-ups they use based on historical crop data that say, hey, we're glad that you're getting all this more yield, you know, and chemical companies are making all this additional money. But the expense is the soil organic carbon content of your soil. And now you have to have those chemicals. So when we intervene, we can be like, hey, farmer, would you consider, well, can we measure what you're doing right now just to see where you're at? So we look back historically from that point in time, look at what they're doing, and we find out, lo and behold, they're not this bad. They're actually only this bad because they're already doing some good things. And then we go to them and we're like, hey, instead of doing just minimum till, you consider doing no-till, just all in, and maybe adding a cover crop, and maybe letting your friend graze his sheep on your farm once a year. And all of a sudden, we set a new trajectory. And all those decisions are increasing the amount of carbon that is sequestered in the soil over time. So instead of just reducing things through agronomic interventions, you're also doing things to sequester more carbon. So you're tackling the CO2 problem from two different angles.
What I'm seeing from this intervention simulation is that we're not getting to that. We're not getting back to the original plateau. We're getting to about half of where we were at.
This is an example.
That's baseline. And then
This is baseline. This is baseline without any regenerative agriculture in this model. And then we go in and find out, and what we found with our farms, about half of them that join the program are already doing some things. You know, not all of them, but some of them are. So we find out that we're not that bad. You know, we're actually right here. And then what we go in is we're like, hey, we're going to pay you 20% more for your barley if you'll share your data with us and you'll do one of these things. And so hopefully we're intervening and creating an even better curve where we're correcting soil. But to your point, we're never going to get back here.
I was going to say, is there any potential to ever go back to the original?
Ruining the plan. So, science aside, yeah.
Sorry, I was just curious if when these farmers turn to regenerative agriculture, do they find like a curve of a couple of years before they start really seeing these benefits?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
which is why. So here, oh man, that was the greatest question for my second to last slide. Because it's a question of risk, okay? And so there's an opportunity cost to consider for the farmer and for all of us But part of that risk as a farmer, if he's like, hey, I'm fourth generation. My dad thinks no-till is crazy. And so does his dad. And I'm going to have to buy a new seed drill that can actually dig into untilled soil to plant my seeds. So it's going to cost me like $25K to even try this. And it's going to take 3 years until I really see benefits. So where's all the risk happening in this? And I'm talking about an entire supply chain. I mean, this is a value chain model from a farm to someone purchasing beer, a brewery. Where's all the risk lying with the change? Farmer. We're like, I'm out there, I'm like, this is going to be great. And the craft brewers care about it. I'm like, I don't know, but I'm like talking about it with them.
We do, I promise.
I feel like they will. Like I have a great feeling. And so yeah, but that's.
But like as brewers, what is this doing to like our COAs? Is it making, I don't know, are you seeing different things with protein counts and beta glucanos and like?
Super great question.
Yeah, like
that's the
well,
number.
There's a lot of different inputs going on
Yeah.
that you're trying to change. So like,
Yeah.
what is happening to our body?
There is. That's the number one question we get. And we're 3 years in, so we just harvested our year 3 crop. We started with 9 farms, about 3,600 acres between the 2 malt houses. We're up to 30 farms in year 3, which is awesome. We're trying to get to half of
And all
our
30
farms.
of those farms are Regen Ag?
Everyone that enrolls in the program is Regen Ag because they've committed to at least one practice. I mean, they're all at different levels, but those are regenerative farms. So, your question was again?
Oh, just like how is it actually impacting?
Yeah, so impacting the barley, we have not seen it. It's not better, but it's not worse. The only notable change I would say is that in areas where there's drought and stress, I think we've been able to accept more barley simply because it's holding more water in the soil. So if things get hot, if there's a drought period, it's got a little bit more resilience to get through that, and it can still hit quality. So I would say that, and there's no way to know,
I mean, rather than more time.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not our quality grades for accepting barley are the exact same for conventional and regen and organic. We're not cutting them a grade because we can't be like, hey, you guys want to buy regenerative malt that's it's 3% less extract, but or it doesn't have quite the right enzyme profile, but look at it has to be just as good. So we have not seen. We haven't seen.
But again, yeah, that's just like adding more risk to the farmers.
Yeah,
because
it
again,
is.
They have to hit the specs.
Yeah, and their change is costly. It's risky. It's really risky at the farm level. Because that's all they deal with is risk. They're like, hey, I got one more risk you should take on. And they're like, go to hell. So we have to dicing that change. The time it takes to make the transition.
Doesn't the term regenerative have a negative connotation?
In what way?
Well, barley is not supposed to be, it's only supposed to be bred. There's not supposed to be anything done with CRISPR to do any genetic modification. We all know that because we're brewers, okay? And we don't have AMA says none of that kind of stuff. Just the term regenerative, for the uninformed, let me put it that way.
Yeah, well, I know what you're saying. I think that genetically modified or genetically engineered, I mean, those are the 2 technologies used to manipulate DNA.
Right, and we're not doing that with barley. Right.
Yeah, it's illegal.
Right.
It's not a deregulated technology.
Yeah. You do it with yeast, you can't do it with barley.
But to yeast, you can use a genetically modified source, but where are my yeast people? Am I right? But it's not actually a GMO that you're putting in your beer, right? He's also one of our farmers. He spends a third of the time in his tractor. He started way before we came to him because he didn't have enough time. He was farming.